So, welcome back to the 1760 sessions where we talk to founders, building systems, and real impact. I'm Harry from 1760, and today I'm joined by Penny Pearl, founder and CEO of 2Actify, a strategic career networking and coaching company that has spent 14 years helping technology executives and scientists figure out how to communicate their value, build strategic networks, and land the roles that actually suit them. Penny is an NLP certified coach, coaches out of the Sierra Nevada foothills in Northern California. I think we spent a long time on our last call looking at the Sierra, the foothills on Google Maps, and I had some good time doing that. So, Penny, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Did I miss anything off of the introduction?
No, I'm just really ready to dive in.
Awesome. So, you've been running to Actify for 14 years. Before we get into the business itself, I want to go back to the very beginning. Where did the idea come from? Was there a moment that made you think this needs to exist?
Yeah, it became very clear to me when I got involved in our daughter's higher education and saw that these young individuals have been trained to apply online to get a job, which doesn't differentiate them at all. And they did that because they had a history of applying to colleges. But the job market is really very different than applying to college because a lot more of your life is going to be uh, pictured for you uh, in how you start your career, what your career trajectory is. So I got involved in higher education. I started working with Rutgers University. Right now, I work with their biomedical scientists and how to move from academia to finding a job in business. But then I branched out and started working with technology executives. And I realized that there's a lot of similarity, even with 40, 50, 60-year-old executives in terms of strategizing their career and making their next move. Because it's a very lonely type of job versus working in a company and getting recognized when you're in a career search. It's something that that an individual really has to do alone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can talk about some of those similarities, but it was a perfect transition. And I'm still working with Rutgers. Yeah.
Amazing. So that's awesome work. And I think the job search is a very solo thing that you do on your own. Sadly, my father who passed away, I used to lean on him as a kid to help me rewrite my CV every time. And now I'm a fully functioning adult. I have to do it all alone. But
Right.
you're saying you started at higher education, biomedical scientist at Rutgers, and this is where you're still doing work. That's a very specific starting point. What drew you there first rather than going straight after corporate executives?
Well, actually, a lot of it depends on the university, the higher education institution. And in this case, they were very dedicated to creating a program for their scientists to find work after they graduated. So it was actually a perfect fit. And one of my contacts within Rutgers, he was a professional at that point. He introduced me to the right people, and they moved forward as a result of networking. When I described my program and it matched what it was they wanted to accomplish, then it was obvious that we needed to move forward together. So I've been doing that for about nine years now.
Okay. And you also have a background in sales. How does that commercial background shape the way you coach? Because most career coaches do not come from that world.
Yeah, the way I coach is very systemized, and I have a program of actions that people take in order to market themselves, because the program is really built on selling yourself, marketing yourself, communicating your value. Now, value is becoming more of a focus in what you see and hear on the internet about establishing your career, and this is something that I've been doing for a long time. So, what I do when I work with the right individual, because you really have to be very committed to following a process in order for it to be successful. And that process starts out with number one, knowing your value. What is it that you contributed to the work that you've done in the past? And what are you really good at? And also, what do you enjoy doing that
Oh,
makes you
yeah.
so good at it? Right. So, understanding what that is and being able to express it in a quantifiable way and also in a way of quality. For example, if you are a product manager and you established a new product, how much revenue did it generate for the organizations you work for? How did it grow those organizations? You need to use numbers, percentages, things that express the value that you offered in your work. And qualifiable is where you were able to focus the company on a single product, which helped the company grow, and they established systems to support the product. So you're not necessarily talking about numbers, but you're still, in both cases, talking about the impact that you made. So being able to communicate that both in writing and a resume and a profile and delivering that in your communication when you talk with people is really how you find those opportunities that are hidden.
And I think what the work you do, well, from the work that you do, I think what is so important is that you're not going to be able to sit there and draw those values out yourself. It's very hard to sit there and be like, right, what am I good at? Where have my successes been? And I think it sometimes takes someone else like yourself to lean over and actually draw this information out of you in order to put your best foot forward.
That's very true. Um, Not only somebody who is looking to hear that and acts as any listener you're speaking with would act or thinks that same way, but helps you frame that, what it is you need to be saying in a concise way so that it's memorable and it's repeatable by the people you're speaking with.
Of
For
course.
example, if I tell you that I'm very, one of the things that I do is I manage projects so tightly. I save the company money in the operations and help to generate revenue from new products very quickly. That's a very concise definition of what I'm really good at. That's repeatable and memorable so that whoever I talk with when I'm networking remembers it and thinks about me whenever somebody talks about that topic. Says, I know a person that you need to talk with because that's what they're really good at.
Yeah, of course. And you said to me you work with two audiences that look quite different on the surface. So, you got your
Right.
PhD scientists and your C-suite technology executive. What is the actual common threads? Because I suspect the problem is the same, even if the titles aren't.
Yeah. Number one is feeling that the only method for getting their next role is by applying online. So that's common because they're not necessarily uh, networking. They are just applying online. Or if they are networking, they're not necessarily um, doing it in a way where they're moving the needle. So that's one area that's really important and common between the two of them. Second is the comfort of communicating their value. And certainly people in the higher ed area, they're used to just submitting an application. So they're not really talking about it until the interview. Okay, so it's not necessarily ingrained in them. But The technology leaders that I work with, um, networking is very difficult for them. Career communication that's promotional is viewed as bragging, so it's really uncomfortable for them. And my communication with them is if you're talking with other people and they don't see the value of your expertise, how do they know where you can fit? How do they know who to introduce you to? How do they know you can solve a specific problem? So they have to be willing to do the things that have been very uncomfortable with them, in their communication from the past.
And you put it really well in our pre-call. When an executive is removed from a company they work for, their kind of identity shrinks. Can you tell me more about that? What does the actual moment look like for someone at a VPO or a CTO level?
Sure. Well, when you're with a company and you're a VP, as an example, and you make a call to another executive in a different company, um, you're a leader talking to a leader. You represent a company. Who knows what the possibilities are in the relationship? Maybe a partnership, maybe a merger and acquisition. Who knows? So doors open. When you're out there looking for other opportunities for yourself, you're you're really doing it alone. You're not doing it on behalf of the company. So, number 1, there's a lot of, a lack of confidence of how do I approach this person with my value? How do I communicate with them so that they realize that I'm looking for opportunities, but I don't want to be so blatant, like I'm only calling for a job. And so it's different. The door isn't open. And you know what? The door, that feeling is really a mindset that the individual has. Most executives are pretty good communicators. They know their stuff. They've got a title, they've got respect of the people that work for them. They've gone through their careers and they've established themselves in their career. And so the mindset sometimes shifts when it comes to networking because they're doing it for a different intention. And that's
So
the
what
challenge for them.
Yeah. So walk me through how you actually work with someone then at the start. They come to you, they have a strong career, they know what they're good at, they know they're good at what they do, and they still can't get traction. What's the first thing you do in this relationship?
The very first thing that I do with an individual is I work with them on their value propositions. And I have a worksheet that they can use, but really I want to find out how do they communicate their value when they're in a one-on-one with another leader. I like to see the written communication that they make when they are asking for a meeting or reconnecting with somebody that they know, because that tells me how they communicate in writing and also communicate verbally. And that's when I start to help them make that shift. I'm going to let them know how it comes across to me, like it may to another individual. So I'm able to see these things that a person who's delivering that may not see.
So you talked about the value proposition as well, what making it both qualitative and quantitative. What does that actually look like in practice for a CTO or VP of engineering? Because those roles are hard to reduce to a pitch, really.
Yeah, well, it depends on their expertise. They might be a product person, they might be an engineering person, but most engineers are usually involved in creating patents, as an example. They're very innovative. They affect many times the delivery of a product, um, on a schedule. So if the company has an objective to deliver a product, a new product or make changes to a product within a certain period of time, that leader of the technology has to make those decisions.
Yeah, yeah.
And recognizing what they did to make it happen because it's part of a business decision is really what they need to communicate. How did it affect the business? How
Cool.
did they
And
motivate the team
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
work toward that goal?
And look, I think strategic networking also kind of applies with this as well, and that's at the core of what you teach. What do most tech execs get completely wrong about networking when they are in a career search as well?
Uh, Number one, they don't necessarily know how to communicate their value because they haven't identified it themselves. They haven't reflected on past accomplishments and what they're really good at going forward as a result of what they've done in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
So helping them to identify those things is key. And sometimes it comes across by just having a conversation, getting to know them, which is really important to me so that I can help them move forward. Um, just in conversation, they mentioned, when I developed these 14 patents at that company, things really made a difference. I said, "Oh, you develop patents. How come that's not in your profile or it's not in your resume?" And you're mentioning it versus identifying it as one of the reasons why that company grew as a result of your contribution.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it is. They find they're amazing people. They do incredible work, not only in inspiring their teams, but also integrating with the business needs of the company and changing the world. But they don't see it that way. I see
Yeah.
it that way. And I help them to see it in a way so that the recipient, the people they're talking with, understand the impact that they made. And it's
And
not
it's
bragging.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. You have to. It's such a weird shift where you have to try and tell them, like, look, the work you're doing is amazing. It's not bragging. You just need a way of communicating it.
Right.
And it's such a big shift to get someone to change that mind frame. But there's probably a nice little aha moment for them, I suppose.
Exactly. And Harry, this is what's also important. They have to sound different than the next person who's trying for a similar role. Otherwise, there's no differentiation other than maybe who you know and who can make things happen for you. You have to up level your communication and really hone your skills in order to position yourself for the right company and the right role. So communication is key.
Yeah, of course. And you teach people to also, this is to do with communication, to pivot in a conversation, to steer to what is most important to the listener. Can you give an example of what that could look like in an interview or network?
Yeah, I have a really good example with a recent client who was working with somebody in his network who happened to be a CEO of a company of interest. And there was some discussion about a role, and he did a great job in talking about his skill set. The company was in the process of trying to figure out how they were going to reorganize in order to get some growth. And a couple of weeks later, after this initial meeting where things sounded very promising, he got a call from the HR department and said, we're really trying to figure things out. It's going to be a couple of weeks before we know how to move forward. And so my client and I are talking because we always do updates on what their strategy is so that we can create finite strategies to keep moving that needle. It's very much of a partnership when I work with them. Anyway, in the discussion, I helped him realize that his conversation shifted from a relationship that he had with the CEO, the hiring authority, and pushed back to human resources. And I think he realized at that very moment that he had to go back to the CEO because that's where his relationship was. And that happens to a lot of people. It gets shifted, and you've got to maintain the relationship with the hiring authority. If it gets shifted, it can dwindle very easily because you're not talking with the decision maker. They're not responsible to talk with you directly. They're delegating it to somebody else. And you've got to show your leadership, even during the interview process. Keep your leadership or take it back. Right? And that's what he did. I don't hear you. Your
Sorry, I was
sound
on
is
mute there
off.
for a
Oh,
second.
yeah.
I was reflecting on some of the interviews that I've done in the past, and I hope this is best practice because I think I did end up getting the job. Is I will everyone I touch base with or have any sort of human contact with, I will be sure to shoot them a follow-up email. And then furthermore, when I have the next stage of the interview in the process, I will update the person I've already spoken with, saying this is what's happened, these are the steps I've been through, just keeping you updated. And that
Right.
way, networking within that organization has already begun before I even joined.
Absolutely. You've got to do that because, there are a couple of things that I suggest people do when in a conversation or even in an interview. And say you're delegated to meet the team, which is a good thing, right? Because they want to make sure there's culture fit, personality fit. Always ask them, how do you feel about my candidacy in this role? Because you'll find out who are the people that are for you or not necessarily going to be, pushing for you to work there.
There's also an element of that where you're almost qualifying yourself out to find out if you're not a good fit early on in the process.
Yes, yes. The other thing is when you meet with your decision maker, it's not a bad idea to say, hey, if I have any questions or anything else comes up, can I reach out to you directly? Because if you don't do that, many times you get pushed to HR. And we all know that HR does not make decisions for hiring. So you've got to stay with that decision maker. And anybody in sales knows that's the person you need to have the strongest relationship with.
Yeah, of course. So, what is the result you are most proud of? Not the biggest name client, but the transformation that stayed with you.
Um, I would say a client that I've worked with, he was high up in his organization. It's a very big technology company. And he knew his values so well that he basically created a boundary for what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. And when he was in the negotiation and they weren't recognizing his value by the offer, he basically passed on the offer, which is like a gut punch to
Huge.
to the person making the offer. Well, he wound up getting even more in terms of his whole package in the end and accepted the role. So to me, that was such a huge success because if you don't market yourself, if you don't know your value and you cannot communicate that value, who's going to do that for you? How are you sounding different from the next person? So the person that communicates their value best, I think, is the person that wins. And that's where my focus is value proposition and being able to communicate it succinctly. Can't hear you.
Sorry. On the other side of things, what is the hardest part of this work? Not for the client, but for you personally.
Finding people who will go through the transformation and invest in it. Because some people don't really value themselves. They don't know that they can be the surest investment they ever make in their lives if they're willing to commit to making the change. And, there are a couple of things that get in the way. They have to trust that the person that they're going to work with is going to take care of them, is going to partner with them, move with them along the way. And somebody has to be ready for the transformation. And, that term is used very broadly, but the transformation means that you're going to have to stop doing the things you were doing that aren't working, and you're going to have to try something different. And it's not always easy. Are you willing to pay for something that isn't going to be easy? Because in the end, you're going to have multiple offers. You're going to make more money. That makes you a great investment. So that's the challenge, is finding the people that are pretty much there versus, convincing somebody to make that next giant step. That's the biggest challenge. I think they have to
Okay.
be there.
And they have to be ready for the transformation. Do you get what I mean? It's
That's
a
right.
full commitment, and that's probably where your sort of education piece comes in, on educating them on how they can transform.
That's right. And sometimes it means that it's not a good fit because somebody is price shopping, they don't trust, they're not willing to say, this is the area that I really could use some help in. And they're just not ready to invest in themselves.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's
So,
quite hard for a C-suite or a tech exec to turn around and have that sort of self-diagnosis that they actually need help.
yeah, sometimes they have to go out there and follow what everybody else is doing. By applying online, they realize that isn't working. Or maybe they're networking, but they're doing it ineffectively, and they're saying, why is it that I can't open doors for myself? That's what I help people do. And it takes doing it in a way where it's really, you're really making a difference in how you communicate, and also speaking to enough people.
Yeah. So, like, look, let's look at the future of 2Actify. What does 2Actify look like in 3 to 5 years? Is it bigger? Is it different? Or is it both?
Well, it's definitely going to be different because I think all of us have to embrace how we use AI for systemizing things. How do I make it easier for the clients that I work with to get ideas to change their communication? So, in answer to that question, I would say it's not going to be much bigger because the way I work is it's a partnership. We do this together. And so it's not like I work with a ton of clients, but I work with the clients that are really committed and ready to celebrate when they get multiple offers. All of a sudden, they're getting 2, 3 offers, and they're able to negotiate not only their best compensation deal, but the real right fit, something that's going to take them to the future. So my goal is to always help them get multiple offers. And if they do the program the way we work together, the way I work together with all my clients, if they're committed and they do that work, that's what the result is going to be. So getting better, more specific, and have a more detailed strategy is where I see to Actify going, and taking advantage of the technology so you can really focus on the most important things.
Amazing. I think we had a conversation before about how you're leveraging AI at the moment, for helping you create content, helping you write. Are there any other which ways you're using AI at the moment?
Um, yeah, putting plans together, programs together. For example, like I have a client who is interested in going into a different marketplace to market his expertise. So let me give you an example. Um, if you're somebody who's an engineering executive and you're competing against everybody else who's going to the CEO for an engineering role, you might want to also consider a different place to go, like VCs or private equity community, so that you can market your skill set to somebody who manages portfolios of companies and need what you've got. So I worked with him in putting together a plan for finding the right people in the private equity community so that he can start reaching out to those individuals and understanding what it is they're looking for. So I
Amazing.
use AI for that, and also the tools that I use for my clients, creating certain tools that everybody seems to need.
And where do all your frameworks and methodologies live at the moment? Are they in your head or have you downloaded them all into AI to have like a separate penny brain to work alongside you?
Yeah, I love Claude. I use Claude a lot. So I have a website, and that's where my tools are. And uh, many places online that I keep, like vaults where I keep that information. So no, it's not all in my head. It's some of it is shared on my website, and also I have vaults that have AI work with me in putting all these plans together.
Yeah.
But,
So look,
there could be more things that I could be doing, so
yeah,
I can talk
there
with you
always
about
is.
that.
The world is evolving. The world is evolving.
Yes,
And look, I've
absolutely.
got one last question for you.
Yeah,
And I want to use your own language back at you. So you spend your days helping tech execs articulate their value clearly and compellingly. What is Penny Pearl's value proposition right now? What are you known for and what do you want to be known for?
okay. I am known for helping technology executives communicate their value propositions so that they stand out as candidates, they broaden their network, and they are known for their expertise so that they attract the right customers. I'm sorry, the right companies as a result of their positioning. People call them to offer positions or offer an introduction rather than having to chase opportunities out there. You create your own opportunities.
Amazing. You create your own opportunities. I love that as a sign off. So, look, Penny, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining. This is Penny Pearl, CEO of 2Actify. If you are a tech exec out there in a career search or transition, or if you want to find out more about Penny's coaching programs and her course, head to 2actify.com. I'll include a link below. And Penny, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Yes, it has for my end too.
Thank you, Penny.
Bye.